Except to tell you that in the 40s and 50s, I was going to Our Lady of Loretto Grammar School 3 or 4 blocks from here, and the nuns really hated me. And you know, I mean, whoever put a kid in a chair for 6 hours a day, I thought that was going to work. I don't know. It didn't work with me, but here I made it. I made it 3 blocks away. And I tell you, there's not much more I could ask for than to be that close to the nuns and be doing this with you all here tonight. It just feels closing a circle, and I'm very happy. I think I have to look at the wall to read this, but it's about the Tribal Cafe and the Sunday Jump. And I wrote this in 2014. I just come back from decades away from California, and I was kind of nervous, and I heard about the Sunday Jump, and I thought it was a great idea, and I couldn't believe it was happening on Temple Street. And what a wonderful job he's done. Okay, the Tribal Cafe with the Sunday Jump rocks the pillars of Temple Street twice a month. Used to be the Travelers Cafe. It is now about a mile from where the original location was on Temple and Figueroa, which is where the interchange is now. But that move cannot compare to the distance it has traveled through 80 years of Phil-Am history in Los Angeles. It's fall 2014. The impresario of Sunday Jump, Eddie Gana, a millennial generation Filipino-American, had invited me and Greg Villanueva and Gerald Glubaton, who isn't here, but they're my co-authors for a book called Filipinotown, Voices from Los Angeles. I was delighted by the invitation, but I was also a little reluctant, because I figured every person, I would be the oldest person there by decades. And I didn't really know what spoken word was, and there was a time, though, when I wasn't so self-conscious. In the 1940s and early 50s, my mother and older sister and I were often treated to dinner at the Travelers Cafe by some of the boys. That is what the Filipino manongs now. They were boys then. They were about your age. Now, they couldn't marry white women. They couldn't buy property. They couldn't own a business. They couldn't do much of anything, and there were no Filipino women here to speak of. I think there was a quota of 50 Filipinos a year that could come, unless they were working as maids or doctors to fill the Filipinos. So we would be treated to dinner at the Travelers Cafe, and the boys, who later became our manongs, would take us. We ate Filipino food, and I remember us having eyes and feet. Then I'd wait impatiently for everyone to finish eating so that I could, with a tiny bit of encouragement, dance. Finally, someone would clear a table, pick me up, and put me in the middle of it, and then put a nickel in the jukebox for music just right for my tap dancing, I called it. During the performance, they threw coins, and sometimes, as I made my way back through the crowd, they handed me dollar bills, adoration, and wealth. Now, decades after my brazen belief that I was a budding movie star, I stood outside the Tribal Cafe, full of trepidation. A large assortment of colored canopies covered the top half of the front window. Enormous plants added to the semi-secret atmosphere. Of course, it was not the way the restaurant looked. It was my own fear of not being appropriate that made me hesitate. My uncles would have called it the fear of being backward. Or they might honestly wonder aloud, Filipinos can go there? There were lots of times they tried to joke about what they feared. They'd make playful, often cutting, but somehow still loving comments to each other. remarking on skin color or accents or lack of education. They especially targeted Uncle Balthasar. He was Bontok. They called him the headhunter and said he'd have to work for his dinner, chopping off heads, I figured. They did, all of them, have to be aware and on the lookout in those days, better not parade themselves, and if they felt any swagger in their step, they'd better leave it at the door. I peered through the window, through the gloom. I'm back now on Temple Street looking at the Tribal Cafe. I peered through the window, through the gloom. My eyes moved toward one well-lighted spot on the wall. Two large paintings, I don't know if you remember them, two large paintings of white skulls on black backgrounds were grinning their bare teeth at me. I smiled, thinking again of Uncle Balthasar. Maybe he had walked in the door with me and was getting a laugh out of the paintings. Certainly, he wouldn't be afraid of those skulls. This gave me the courage I needed. I picked up some swagger, placed it in my step, and walked on in. Immediately, I saw my friend, Gerald, and joined him at his table. Gerald's age was somewhere between everybody else's in the room and mine, so I had to sort of bridge to the young crowd. We were deciding which pieces to read from our Filipinotown anthology when Eddie came by and welcomed us warmly. He genuinely seemed happy that we were there and would perform. I relaxed a little. Then Eddie left the table. And went front and center and began his opening poem. It was a letter to Manong Larry Itliong. The first sentence was, "Thank you." Beautiful. As he continued to thank Larry Itliong, listing all the things we have to be grateful for because of him, the words, the cadence, the undeniable sincerity pierced my heart. This young man, half a century after Itliong had led Filipino farm workers in a labor strike in Delano, felt personally connected to the Manong he addressed directly, saying, "You didn't just pick grapes, you picked fights with an agricultural industry," and he won too. As I listened to Eddie, it was as if nothing was lost, nothing broken, all was well and strong. My connection to Temple Street grows suddenly deeper and more immediate as I begin my poem. Filipinotown, what is it? What was it? In the same moment that I asked the question, I'm thrown back to the time when I danced on the tables and was applauded by my uncles whose lives were so hard. But who handled it all with such style and grace, and I feel now that same presence. I just barely made it to the last line of my own poem before my voice broke. I paused and said in a near whisper, Filipinotown is in our compadres, in each other, learning America, finding a place in the scheme of things. This was Sunday Jump at the Tribal Cafe. I was definitely home again.